Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Greiner, your host for today's 𝘬𝘂𝗧 podcast. And with me today, I have Dr. Sue Burlatschenko, who is with the Goshen Veterinary Clinic in Canada. How are you today, Sue?
I'm great, thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you on today. For our audience who may not be familiar with you, let's maybe take a couple moments and just have you do a little bit of a background about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm a solo practitioner now of many years experience. I think, as we were saying earlier, about 38 years. Started out in a mixed animal practice, then segued for 3 years with the provincial Ministry of Agriculture and Food doing swine work there. And after that, I opened up my own shop as a swine practitioner, continued to do some small animal practice to pay the mortgage, and then eventually just started doing swine only. So it's been a long time. I've had a lot of fun with it. Along the way, I did a diplomate in swine health and production. In 2005, I recertified in 2015, and I also went back and did a Master of Public Health, which I finished in 2013. So apparently learning is a career path for me as well.
Perfect. Well, it's always good to be a lifelong learner.
It is.
One of the things that we were visiting with a little bit is kind of where you're at in your career path now. You're a sole practitioner, and you have some time where you spend with veterinarians that are new to the industry or new to the profession. What do you notice in terms of mentoring those students? What are some maybe tips and tricks that we can share with our group today on how to help our new veterinarians into the profession?
Well, I think, they're understandably nervous. A lot of them. I wouldn't say it's an overwhelming impression, but I mean, I was the same way myself. You know, you're suddenly launched in the world with a DR in front of your name and you're like, oh, things just got real. And then you realize all the things you don't know because you haven't got the benefit of experience. And I think that can be really intimidating if you're working with veterinarians, that they just, they sort of, it's almost off the cuff. They just seem to know everything. And I remember struggling when I was younger. So when I'm with the students, it's really, or students, the young vets or students, I'm really, I'm pretty laid back. I think I'm just an Uber mom, we just talk about a lot of things, life in general, and, take them through some fun cases, I take them to some simpler farms if I'm working with younger vets, and just getting them, up to speed. Certainly these large operations can be quite intimidating. And so my approach when I'm going in is certainly just to go through the barns initially, show them what the layout is, show them how the operation is run, introduce them to some people there. And then once we're finished, with that aspect, if there's records analysis or anything, then we'll look at that afterwards. I always just like to have an open mind. That's always been my approach, an open mind going into herds, because if you look at records first, and I'm lecturing a little bit here, so you have to forgive me, but you wind up with a preconceived notion sometimes. You'll see something and you go, oh, I think, this looks like it's this. And then you go in the barn and your brain will tell you, oh yeah, it's that. And you'll miss some of the subtle details that might be contributing to whatever indices you were looking at. So going in there with an open mind, and this kind of rolls back to actually a classmate of mine who was in swine before I was. And when I started getting into them, thanks to her, I said, oh gosh, I'm limited in my experience. I'm going to be working with a lot of small purebred breeders here in Ontario. And I said, what am I going to do? And the best advice I ever had, and I still tell young people this to this day, shut up and listen. And it has informed my entire career. I mean, I do find it hard to shut up at times, but when I'm working up a really difficult case, listening, the art of listening, and I've inserted that sort of, into many things I've done over my career. The art of listening is really hard. And you have to be able to basically unhook your brain from your butt and just listen to what people are telling you, because initially they'll tell you everything that they think you want to hear. And then once they've kind of overcome that, and you talk about, hey, how were the kids' soccer games last night, or how's grandma in the hospital, and you know your clients. I have a very small practice. I call it a boutique practice, and so I know everybody quite well, and you get into the human part of that vet client relationship, and people relax. And then as you're going along, quite often when I'm working something up, they'll say, well, then I did blah, and I'm like, there's the missing piece, because you're listening. And they're starting to resonate with you. You just can't go blasting into a barn talking about everything, and then people sort of dither a little bit, and then you're probably going to miss whatever you're looking for. And so it's a real art to learn that. But along with the art of listening, I think comes the art of empathy, and that's harder to learn. I think you're either born with it or not, but you can certainly improve your empathetic skills by listening. And I think that's a really important starting point. And then if people are really comfortable with you, certainly as a young vet with maybe not a big skill set like the older practitioners, but you're already welcomed into those barns, and they've already started to build that trust. And trust is huge between us, And so that's when you're going into a barn as a young vet, once you've established that, then your relation starts to build, and your confidence builds, the client's confidence is building in you, and it becomes really a positive back and forth kind of event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't agree any more with you on that comment. One of the things that I always had found when I was out in the barns is, as you have that communication, even if you don't know the answer, and it's okay not to know, right? Especially new in your career, it's the commitment to going and finding the answer. And
yes.
If you can do that and relay it back to the owner, they're a little bit more forgiving if you don't know it immediately on the spot, relative to, okay, well, they know that they can, as you said, trust you, that you're going to go and you're going to get that information. You're going to get it back to them in a timely manner.
And that's also what I call the art of saying, I don't know. Because you don't know. And so when the young vets are out, or the students, I say, that's another thing you need to learn. And you're exactly on point with that comment. The students or the young vets, I say, you give your list of rule outs, you take some samples. One of the big things I like to tell people is give them something to do. Whatever it might be, changing a little technique, adjusting the ventilation, whatever it is, you give them something to do, so you've left them with something while you go back with whatever samples you took, hoping you got the right things. And then you go talk to the senior vet and said, I have no idea what's going on. And that's fine. Then you get some clues from the senior vet who says, well, did you do this and this? And you go, oh, okay. But then you told the client while you were there, you're going to call them in 2 or 3 days to see how that something to do was going. At this point now, you're armed with more information. They're delighted because you called them back, and it shows your interest and your concern. So again, it's building, and you're also learning from that. So it's really hard to say, I don't know. I can say it at my stage because everybody knows if I don't know, I really don't know. And I'll work through it. And I've had some pretty wild cases where it's like, I really should be doing something else for a living. But, you dog it and you pursue it. And then very frequently you'll get to at least a partial answer, if not the whole answer. But it's work. And so I think everybody you hear these stories, at conferences where vets give these glorious cases and they went from A to Z in no time at all. And you're like, oh man, I'm stupid. And then they probably went through the whole part of, I don't know, maybe I should go truck riding for a living. I'm not doing anybody any good here. But when you present it, of course, it's very elegant. So I think it's remembering that we've all been there and done that. It's a rite of passage in veterinary medicine or in human medicine. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think as professionals, we all have that vision of maybe being the person that hits that big home run, and either you discover something new or you find a new way to treat something, or, whichever profession you're in, whether it's veterinary medicine or nutrition or repro or whatever. But I think it's important to remember too, that not everything, we always used to say, if you hear hoof prints, think horses, not zebras, right? Not everything's going to be this new and exciting thing. It may still be the same 𝘬𝑚𝑒 that you've chased, 10 times in this barn, just looks a little different.
Exactly.
How do you help maybe quell a little bit of that nervousness and that excitement of wanting to go discover the new things, and just help them get comfortable with the day-to-day and starting there.
Get your routine done. You have to develop a barn routine that you do the same approaches. Every barn is different, so your approach may be different depending on what you're, obviously a grow finish barn as opposed to a farrow to wean operation. But saying that, develop a consistent approach for when you're going through. I always start, for example, when I go into a sow barn, I always go through breeding gestation first. I start where the babies are made and look at whatever issues are happening in there. And then I go into the farrowing room and we look at that, and then we can go to the nursery afterwards. But, they're quite different, obviously, stages of production. And so they need different approaches. And once you've got that consistency, that's a good thing, because that's going to help with your diagnostic approach. And it's just a lot of trial and error, but it's getting that consistent approach to what you're doing is really going to help you, and certainly keep some of the zebras away.
Yes. One of the other things we talked a little bit about, though, is, certainly our minds are always thinking about foreign animal disease today. And rightfully so. It's something we should focus on here in North America. As a young vet, I think that there's, again, some of this nervous energy or nervous expectation around that. And so I'm going to go backwards a little bit. I'm going to go back to PED. I was working in a production system when PED came into the United States, and we had some very young vets in the office, and right, there's this panic of what do we do? And of course we turn over and we look at the vets who've, eliminated myco from herds and dealt with TGE and pseudo, and we use that expertise to help. So how do we help that younger generation of veterinarians kind of mentally prepare for that potential that we could have an introduction and what the next steps are?
Well, certainly in Canada, I think PD has really given us a great heads up for incursion of foreign viruses. That's really what we're looking at now for foreign animal diseases. So I can, look at my experience with PED as being the first vet in Canada to diagnose it, which never had crossed my radar. I mean, I always thought it'd be somebody else. Thank you very much. And then, when you get the phone call that night and they say, hey, Sue, you had a positive. And I tell everybody, I've given talks on this, and just this big black pit opened up in front of me. And I just stopped for a minute and I thought, what am I going to do? My mind stopped. Everything just stopped. Well, the good thing is we had an emergency response team with our Ministry of Agriculture and Food. So, the commodity group, Ontario Pork, the Ministry of Ag and Food, we just, this whole group just was there. We had the first conference call that night, an hour after I got the phone call saying you had a positive, and I was seconded onto the team, and everybody had a process in place to start working with it. I mean, we didn't know what we were going to do. It was only one herd initially diagnosed. But it was really, really cool to be part of that whole process. So it's really funny how my mind just stopped working, because I wasn't expecting to find a foreign animal disease. And then secondly was, well, what do I do? And everything you've been talking, you call the feds and you call the provincial people and you do this. And then it's like, I don't know. But I'd already called the provincial folks, and so they already had a heads up because I was suspicious that morning. So everything came into play, but it surprised me with all the experience I had on my take on it. So that's one thing to be obviously aware of the foreign animal diseases and how they manifest themselves. Certainly I've been doing some training with just sort of field people recently, and I don't expect them to be diagnosticians, but basically if you have something really weird going on, a lot of pigs and they're piling up and they're really sick and they have like a lot of bruising and hemorrhages all over them, or they're bleeding from the nose, or they're dying, or whatever they're doing, make a phone call. Just call somebody. You may not even know what it is, or there's a pile of blisters on their nose, like Seneca Valley virus gave us a big shake up. Call somebody. That's the best thing you can do. Don't leave it and become a vector. And I think that's everybody's terror as a veterinarian. You're the one that missed that diagnosis, and there it went. So it was very informative doing that. And I have great faith in both the States and Canada, because we certainly have our emergency preparedness getting into place and really drilling down to the fine details, where we're a little more coarse with our look at how we manage PED.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. What about to maybe the potential veterinary students that are listening today to the podcast? Do you have any recommendations for them to be doing now before they head out into their career paths?
Get a really good mentor. I tell everybody that. And whether you call them a mentor or a go-to person, I learned that as much experience as I had when PED was in its early stages, I had my go-to person who was my mentor when I was at the Ontario Veterinary College, and who still is basically practicing today. And so I called my go-to person almost nightly, because the other side of, certainly these foreign animal diseases, or just any issues in practice, is that there's a tremendous emotional component to it. And I was really surprised at my very stoic clients who are Dutch in origin, many of them, really took this very hard, seeing the enormous death loss in these very young piglets. And it was not easy. And I hadn't quite expected that response. You don't know what to expect anyway. And then, so I would call my go-to person and talk every night. But what happens is, and this will happen whether you have an outbreak in an area, say it's a really nasty strain of PRRS, and people are really upset and they're calling you and they're leaning on you. And, one barn goes down, then another barn goes down, and then 4 days later, another barn goes down. And suddenly you are reliving the nightmare over and over as the vet. They're only reliving it once, or living it once. We're reliving it all the time. So a really good go-to person, either, a professional one, a personal one, I think it's super healthy. That you're not out there on your own, or, alone in practice, perhaps thinking I should do a better job. You're learning all the time. I'm still learning. And I'm amazed at how much I have left to learn. So I guess I'm going to be around for that 100 years maybe, but having the go-to people really help a lot, really helped me a lot. And so I would say you need to have those supports.
I think that's a really good comment, is that emotional piece. The veterinary profession can be very difficult. And as a solo practitioner, that looks a lot different than maybe the clinics that have 5 or 6 veterinarians on staff. And so how do you help those individuals who do want to be in those private practices, or, a very small mixed animal practice where they might be on call quite frequently? Is there any tips or advice you might give them?
Gosh, yeah, the on-call can be really demanding. And I think all of us older folks have been through that. It's like, yeah, done that. It's all good. I would say, having a good clinic culture is really important, that you can discuss your cases, have people help guide you through them, a really good working relationship with your superiors or the older vets, whatever you want to call them. Even the technicians often have a great amount of knowledge in those practices that they can assist you with. So I wouldn't be afraid to say, I don't know, or I need help with this, or I need to learn something more. And it also, as the employer, alerts you to, okay, they really want to learn this. So how can I help them? Where can I send them? Are there course, whatever's going on. So I think it's a really positive two-way street, and it helps with retention of young vets. I'm not sure I was that fortunate when I was a younger vet to have that same courtesy, I guess, if you will, or consideration. I think when we graduated, you're sort of expected to go out and do it. And it's a different world now. And I think, more of us working collegially together in practice and between practices, to me, is really important at this stage of my career. And I think as younger vets, I would work on that, developing these relationships with people who have expertise in different areas, especially.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. You had talked earlier about when you have new veterinarians or veterinary students with you, and you're at farms and you're walking through those barns and you're communicating with the farm staff, and you don't look at records until afterwards. What tips and tricks do you have for record looking at? I mean, I think that's records can be so overwhelming. So, where do you slice that pie to help them see the big things?
Well, with records, I love numbers, and I love looking at records, because if you're numerically inclined, let me interject, you don't remember anybody's name. And so my kids, although they have real names, I used to call them 1, 2, and 3, because that's how I kept them sorted out. They were used to me. But records are fabulous, whether they be, accounting records, or, obviously I'm looking at production records. So you pull out the ones that are really important. Start with the easy ones, repeat rates, farrowing rates, days to estrus, pigs weaned per sow, pigs born alive, pre-weaning mortality. Just hit the high points. And then you sort of put the other white noise to the side, and just get them used to looking at that and trying to interpret them, looking at trends over time, seeing what's happening. Why is a weekly examination maybe not as useful as a 3-month aggregate sort of thing. And it took me a while to learn myself. And I think, I try and pass some of that knowledge, and I don't often get the students for very long. So it's really hard to walk them through the numbers, but getting them started. And to tell you the truth, years and years and years ago, between Lehman or ASV conferences, there was always good lectures on, or pre-conference lectures, seminars on interpreting different aspects of production records. And I still have those notes, and I'll photocopy them and give them to them, because these things don't change. Well, the numbers themselves, we're getting more pigs per sow, but how you examine them don't change. So here, take this dinosaurs notes and look at them, and, start understanding, what we're looking for, what we're looking to achieve by looking at these numbers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a really good suggestion on how to do that, because numbers can be overwhelming. Especially, someone who's not very familiar, and we know, right? We have more and more individuals coming into veterinary medicine that maybe didn't have that farm background, let alone a production background. So just walking into the barn is intimidating, but then to see this overwhelming number of numbers can also really throw some.
And I think that's where mentorship's really important. So it's, it's not sort of like bring you into this barn and we looked at the records and we called it a day. I think doing this repetitively, if they are really interested in, and being able to work with them when they have, a day to come out with you, or you have a day to go out with them, however it's going, the schedules merge, and, getting them in the saddle and getting, that initial comfort level. And then they start, again, understanding what they're looking at, and then going forward from there.
Absolutely. Well, Sue, as we kind of wrap up our time here, are there a couple of key points or tips that you'd either like to share with the prospective veterinary students, or new professionals, or even employers of those new professionals?
Oh, golly. What am I going to say? Have faith in yourself. You got this far. You didn't get there by being stupid, really. You've got a lot of brains between those ears. So have faith in yourself, and know you're going to do a few face plants when you first get out and practice. Everybody goes through it. I call it baptism by fire, did all that. And it's a learning. That's how we learn. You learn from your mistakes, and you feel bad and you keep going forward, but have faith in yourself. That's why you're here. I've heard people say to me, oh, these vets, they're struggling. They want to leave the profession. And I think, where is the mentorship? Where is the go-to people? Where is the go-to for the personal part? If you really had a bad case or a difficult case, and say mixed animal practice, and you feel terrible about the outcome, we've got to be there and say, yeah, it's happened to me, and support people through that. So I think I think it's really important. If you believe in yourself, you'll be a fine practitioner.
Yeah. And I think that ties in nicely with kind of the theme of today, is the communication.
Absolutely.
Whether you're communicating with farm staff or owners about what they're seeing in the barns, to your own personal emotional component, that communication is going to be key.
It's probably, I've said this before to people, and it's probably 60% of my practice is communication. Walking people off the ledge. I had a screaming phone call Friday, guys losing a lot of pigs, hemorrhagic enteritis, yada, yada, yada. Nothing's changed in the barn for the last 6 years. And he's really upset, and we went through the list, and I'm like, okay, certainly our diagnostics now have changed. What we thought it was a bacterial, clostridial infection. Now we think it's other components, some kind of fermentation. And so I thought about that and I said, I'd check the grind of your feed if I were you, and I'd probably coarsen it up to start with. But we do have to stop these pigs from dying. So I put a targeted intervention as far as medication went in. And by Monday, he'd called me back. I sent the stuff out to him, and it's the relief. It's like, thank you. It's working. We haven't lost any pigs since, Saturday or Sunday. And he says, this is just, and really, he was really upset. And it's easy to get lit by your clients. And then you start dithering as well. But just kind of going through methodically, I always go back and cross-check my references. I looked up the recent diagnostics of hemorrhagic arteries. Has anything changed? Go online, look at my textbooks. I'm a big textbook fan myself. And just make sure I'm giving the best information I can give to them, because their profitability relies on the information I'm giving them. So I want to be as current as I can. I also did say, bring me some poop samples. We're going to send them in. We're going to rule out ileitis, any other bad guys. Maybe it's a really late post-wing E. coli. I don't think so. But, so I gave him something to do, right? Bring this in while we're waiting for the antibiotic to work, and we'll go forward from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Perfect. No, that's a great example and advice for the audience. Well, Sue, as we wrap up our time, some of the things that we do is we do ask our guest speaker a couple of questions. It's the same across all of our guest speakers. The first one we like to ask is, what's your favorite swine resource? And I just heard you say you're a textbook fan. So
I'm a huge textbook fan. I'm such a nerd for textbooks. I just picked up a terrific toxicologic pathology set, because I get in these really weird cases, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to order this. They're horrendously expensive, but I also downloaded the digital version, so it's in my phone if I need it. Basically, I've got the textbooks there that I can sit and peruse if I have to, and they're almost like a comfort. They're, to me, I think us older practitioners, holding a book and reading it, there's just something about it. I think the younger vets are like, well, she's a dinosaur, but that's okay. I don't mind. So long as the job gets done, whether you want the computer or you want the book, it's all good.
Toxicology pathology. Is that what I heard you say?
Toxicologic pathology. I struggle with that myself. Very, very cool. And then I also got a forensic pathology set as well, just because it's like, oh, this looks really interesting. And I'm at the stage of my career that I'm like, a magpie. Oh, this looks really interesting. Kids come home and they go, yeah, Mom, there you go. You're filling up another bookshelf.
But it's good. It's always learning. And we hear that a lot on the podcast, is lifelong learning. And
yes.
So I commend you for, because I think you never know what you're going to stumble upon.
Well, I think that's the beauty of veterinary medicine, or medicine in general. You just don't know. And you might think you know. And nature's going to hand it back to you sometimes. And you're like, okay, I have to go and read the book on this.
Yep, absolutely. Well, how about something that's not pig related? Are there any books that you might recommend to the audience?
Oh, I'm a big reader, clearly, but what I love to read are sort of essay type magazines that are out of my norm. So, I read Nature magazine, but that's heavy, but it certainly alerts me to what's happening in the other sciences. But I love reading about, essays on society in general, the arts. And so the New Yorker is one of my favorite. It comes at the end of the week to my house, and it's my Sunday morning curl up in a chair and just, it's in, the microcosm of New York City, if you can call it that. But it's, it just takes me to other places, and it really informs me about topics that I had not thought about. And I think it's very mind expanding. So find something that you enjoy like that takes you way out of your field of interest. And I think it's good for, like I said, mind expansion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's an interesting one.
Yes.
So the last question I have for you, Sue, really focuses on if you can envision somebody in your mind that in your life you've defined as successful, what characteristic about them stands out to you that you think has allowed them to be successful?
Well, you've heard me say it all through this conversation, and it's communication. I think my favorite people who are older practitioners than I am had really developed that art. And that's why they're still practicing long past maybe when some of us had reached our best before dates, because they love what they do and they're good at communicating it, and people want them, whether it's for the diagnostics or it's just for the conversation. It's that human touch, and sometimes it's sorely lacking in our society. And I think it's something that we give back to people.
Perfect. That's great. Well, Sue, we do want to thank you for your time today. It's been an enjoyable visit. For our audience, just a reminder, this is Dr. Sue Burlatschenko, who's with 𝘏𝘢𝘪𝘵 Veterinary Service in Ontario, Canada. Sue, thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this.
It was a pleasure.
Imagine if, with a few key concepts, you could have the potential to create a massive positive impact by bringing from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for swine producers. Join us on this small group and go to the next level of swine nutrition on this 7-week-long elite online training in applied swine nutrition and feeding by myself and my world-class invited speakers. Additionally, you enjoy an exclusive community to exchange ideas. Go now to www.eliteswinenutritionist.com.